Hi, this is Pat Sauer. I'm the Executive Director of the Iowa Stormwater Education Partnership. I am here with Dr. Tom Rosberg, who is on faculty at Drake University in the biology department. His focus is on botany. And we're in Reactor Woods, which is in Ames, and Tom is going to guide us through a look at April and May woodland flowers.
All right, yes, I'm Tom Rosberg, professor of biology at Drake University. I'll make a quick correction there. I was former chair of the Department of Biology, no longer doing that job. But I teach I've taught up to 16 different classes at Drake. Most of them are centered on ecology and plants. And I do a lot of floristic surveys in the research that I do. So this is home for me, walking around out here in a natural area and looking at plants. And we're going to help you learn some of these more common species that you would see if you were out here with us. So we'll start with a real conspicuous one here. It's called yellow violet. If Pat can pan over here, I can point to one right here. There's several of them in this area right here. Downy yellow violet. I'll give you the common names and the scientific names. This is Viola pubescens. It's a very distinctive plant, easy to pick up on and learn. Like all the violets, it has a violet-shaped flower, 5 petals with a spur petal on the bottom. That bottom petal, if I were able to show you the base of it here, has a little of a spur pouch on it. Okay, let's see if we can show that to you. Pull the petals off. This little area right in here is a place where nectar is going to collect, and that's where the insects then find it as they come and pollinate the plants. So all violets kind of have this shape that we see here. Most violets have heart-shaped leaves, or at least something resembling a heart-shaped leaf, as you see on these plants here. And the really distinctive thing about the yellow violet is the yellow flowers, because most violets you're going to run into are going to be bluish, more of a dark blue or dark purple. And this is yellow, of course. There are a few species that are white. And then the other thing is that this violet has leaves that come off of an upright stem, as we can see here. There's a stem right here, and then there's leaves that are attached to the stem. So we call that caulescent. That's the term that's used to describe a plant that has a stem like this with leaves that arise off the stem. A lot of the other blue flowered violets don't have this upright stem. They just have a clump of basal leaves that arise from a little short rootstock that's in the ground, and then flowers that come from that cluster of leaves. Those are called the basal-leaved or acaulescent species. So again, the yellow violet is really easy to pick up on and learn because it's quite different from the other species. Another one right here amongst this little group is the Virginia bluebell. It's another very easy one for beginners to learn. This is one that's often planted in flower gardens as well as found out here in the woods. This is called Mertensia virginica, Virginia bluebell. And so it's in a family that called the Boraginaceae family. The flowers, here I'll pull a few off, the flowers are pretty distinctive. They have petals, 5 petals that are fused together to form a tube. And you can see kind of a long tube here at the base, and then it kind of flares out at the end here. And you can, if you look real close, you can actually count 5 lobes here that represent the 5 petals. So Virginia bluebells is a species that blooms in the spring. One thing we'll talk about here is that we've got a lot of spring blooming species. And so we've got spring bloomers and we've got spring ephemerals. The violet, going back to the violet, that's a spring blooming species, but it's not a spring ephemeral. The violet will bloom now, it'll produce fruits, it'll produce seeds, and then the vegetative part of the violet will remain, and you could find it all summer long. The bluebells is kind of a plant that's in between what we call spring ephemerals and spring bloomers. It's blooming now in the spring too, but the plant will not persist all summer. When it gets done flowering, it produces the seeds. Slowly the plant will start to senesce and die back, and probably by the 1st of July, most of the vegetative part of the plant will be pretty much be gone. That's in contrast with a true spring ephemeral that we see right here called Spring Beauty. Spring Beauty is one of 5 or 6 true spring ephemerals that we have flowering now. So again, this is also a spring blooming species, but it's also a spring ephemeral. And the difference is that like the other plants that's blooming now in the spring, because it's taking advantage of the higher light levels that are present in the forest, the leaves are just beginning to come onto the trees. This has been blooming for several weeks, so it's adapted to the strategy that let's get growth going before the leaves come out, have better access to the sun. It waits until it warms up enough, of course, just that 2-week period when we start getting warmer temperatures, about middle part of April, and then it wants to be done by about right now, because the leaves are coming out on the trees right now, and it is just about done. Most of these spring beauties here have a few flowers on them yet, but all these little things down here are fruits that are beginning to form. So it's just about done. So again, let's go back and talk about spring ephemeral. So what we mean by spring ephemeral is it utilizes this early spring time period to grow and photosynthesize and produce seeds and fruits, and then the plant completely senesces or dies back. It goes into hibernation. In a sense, by middle of May or by the end of May, there won't be any sign of the vegetative part of the plant at all. It will essentially be hibernating below ground. These guys have a little bulb, I believe, that they grow from below ground, and that it produces energy, of course, while it's photosynthesizing for the 3 or 4 weeks that it's growing, puts food in the bulb, produces a flower, produces seeds, and then essentially goes to sleep and is asleep for 10.5 months or so of the year. It'll wake up again next spring. So that's what we mean by a spring ephemeral. The plant completely dies back and senesces after it gets done flowering and produces seed, and essentially, as I said, goes dormant or hibernates for 10 to 11 months until the next spring. Spring Beauty is an easy one to identify. It's an early one. It has 2 leaves, just 2 leaves that come off the stem, usually right about mid-height on the stem, opposite each other. They're kind of linear, fleshy, a little bit thick leaves. And then it produces a cluster of flowers. We call this a raceme, but a cluster of flowers. Each of them has 5 petals. When you look at these really close up, you can see that they're white with some pink stripes going through the petals, and they kind of follow the sun. When the sun's out, they kind of follow the sun, kind of solar track. On really cloudy days or at night, they close down. So you really to get good pictures of these guys, you really want to be out when it's nice and sunny. Spring Beauties, Claytonia virginica. There are about 25 other species of Claytonia in North America. This is the only one that we have growing in Iowa. And we have some ginger, wild ginger here along this trail. Here's a nice plant right here that you can maybe hone in on and see the flower right there. So this is not a very conspicuous flower. It's just this maroon colored petals right here. It branches off of the plant way low on the stem near the ground, and actually quite often these flowers are resting on the leaves or on the ground surface and are really hard to see. The plant has a couple of leaves that are opposite each other, and the flower arises from that point where the leaves meet down here. So wild ginger, Asarum canadense is the scientific name, is a really nice low-growing plant. It does produce a sort of a ginger type of flavoring. One could use if you were to dig up the rootstock, and of course that's going to kill the plant if you do that, but that's where its name comes from. Wild ginger. The leaves are kind of distinctive, and they're really broad and have this really kind of heart-shaped structure to them, as you can see here, and so they're a little bit like a violet, I suppose you might say, but a lot broader, with bigger lobes down here at the base of the leaves. All right. Another plant that we have among this little area right here is a bunch of Virginia waterleaf. Now, it's not in flower yet, but here's some plants over here. Here's a leaf that I think is pretty easy to see. These are plants that have just basal leaves that arise from, again, a short little stem that's below ground. You'll see just these basal leaves. The leaves are divided into leaflets, usually 7, maybe 9 of those. And of course, it gets its name, Virginia waterleaf, from the little water-like spots, the lighter green spots that we can see on these plants here. Here's another one over here. That splotching that you see makes Virginia waterleaf a really easy one to learn, and it will flower in probably about another couple weeks or so. Then we have one that's in flower over here, this nice big white oak. That is a real common species in our upland forest environments. This one has a couple of different common names. Wild Sweet William is one, or Woodland Phlox is another one. It is in the phlox family, the Polemoniaceae. Scientific name here is Phlox divaricata. So the phloxes, and again, this is another one that has garden varieties. There's more of a garden variety species that you can have for your flower beds at home. All the phlox have a flower that has, we can pull one off here, got a couple here. They have 5 petals, and the base of the petals are all fused into a very slender tube. This slender tube right here. So the petals are fused together and form a tube, and then this one only has 4 left on it, but there are 5. Here's 5 right here. One of them has fallen off. 5 petals that are fused together, and again, the tips of those petals are not fused. These are called the lobes of the petals that flare out. Opposite leaves on the stem that are similar to kind of the leaves that we're just looking at there with the Solomon seal. The base of the leaves kind of wrap around and clasp the stem. Woodland Phlox. Hey, we found a spot here with 3 of the spring ephemerals that I want to show you. It's getting a little bit late to see them in flower because, as I was talking about this earlier, they are among the very first things to bloom in the spring. They are really anxious, and as soon as the ground gets warm enough, they are ready to go and get some photosynthesis done, get some energy going in the plant, get some energy to the root system, and start thinking about producing flowers and making seed. And the three species that we have here are all on the very end of their time this year. They're wrapping things up basically. The first one here is Dutchman's Breeches. These are the leaves, the basal leaves of Dutchman's Breeches right here. There are no flowers, unfortunately, here. In fact, I don't even really see any fruits here. Very fern-like, kind of highly divided leaves. They basically are divided at least at 4 different levels. So this is the basal leaf right here. Now this plant's gonna senesce and gonna die, and there's lots of them around here. So I'm just gonna show you again where this plant is coming from. It's coming from this little underground cluster of little bulblets. You can see those, and this is again where energy is stored. This is what stays alive and stays dormant over the summertime and produces the plants next spring. The plant consists just of these basal leaves. This is the basal leaf, it's arising from this bulb down here, and there's 4 levels essentially of division here. This is the first level of division. These leaflets that come out here, then there's another level of division right here, and then this has separate lobes on it. There's a couple of more lobes right in through here on this thing. So what I mean by this is that at 4 different levels, the plant kind of has these leaves divided into either leaflets or lobes. That's what makes it kind of fern-like. It produces very characteristic flowers. We're too late to see any of them. Little white flowers that kind of hang upside down. The name Dutchman's Breeches comes from the fact that the flowers resemble little Dutch pantaloons. They are a very kind of complicated flower, those Dutchman's Breeches flowers. They have 4 petals, and they are fused together in a way that 2 petals are fused together and surround 2 smaller petals that sit inside of them. If you get a chance to see them, that's something you should take a look at sometime. Just take a look at those petals, kind of pull things apart and see what's going on there. So Dutchman's Breeches is starting to senesce, as I said, and will die back and be completely gone. It's a spring ephemeral. Another spring ephemeral here, right in front of me, is toothwort. Toothwort, Cardamine concatenata, is in the mustard family. It has 3 leaves that arise here from the same point, and these leaves too are very divided and heavily lobed. As you can see, lots of lobing going on here. And it has, it'll produce flowers that have 4 petals, like all mustards, little white flowers with 4 petals. It too is done with that now, and it's forming the fruits. These are the fruits right here, these long, slender structures right here. These are called calyx. Inside these calyx are rows of seeds. So again, the toothwort, spring ephemeral, already done making its seeds. Going to disperse these seeds in the next few days, and then it too will start to look more like Dutchman's Breeches there. The plant will start to die back, and again these spring ephemerals are going to go dormant in just a few more, well, even just a few more days, or probably within a week or so. That's second then spring ephemeral here. The third spring ephemeral is trout lilies, and there's a nice one right over here. Trout lilies are very easy to distinguish. Again, an easy plant to learn if you're just beginning. They have these broad monocot type leaves. It is a species of monocot, meaning that it's got parallel veins. The flowers are again gone. There's just a few old flowers that I've seen on a few plants here. This one has got a fruit right here, a little capsule that is forming seeds inside of it. It's not quite ripe yet, but the capsule will open up and drop seeds out. The seeds on many of these spring ephemerals, the trout lilies and the Dutchman's breeches, for example, have little structures on them, little outgrowths that come off of the seed coat that are called elaiosomes that attract ants. And so these spring ephemerals they drop the seeds out of these capsules onto the ground, but then ants come along and pick up those seeds because they are attracted to the elaiosome. Elaiosome has a high amount of proteins and fats and some sugars in it, so it's a very nutritious, high energy little ant-sized piece of food, and the ants are really attracted to those. They pick up the seeds, carry those seeds ways back to their colonies, cut the elaiosomes off and keep the elaiosomes because that's the food part that they want, and discard the rest, so the seed gets moved around by ants. The trout lily is a really common species. There are places out here in the forest here that you can see literally thousands of trout lily plants growing. Most of them have just a single leaf. This one has 2 leaves, as you can see, or maybe you noticed here, and that means that it's old enough to have 2 leaves, and only the 2-leaf plants are the ones that produce flowers. So many cases we'll see a big colony of trout lilies and you see lots and lots of leaves. If you look real close, most of those plants just have 1 leaf, and the 1-leaf plants will not flower. They're not old enough yet. There's some research that suggests the trout lilies have to be maybe 6-7 years old in order to produce a plant big enough and has enough vigor, has enough of a root system to produce 2 leaves, and therefore be old enough or mature enough to produce flowers and seed. We found a really nice one here. This is usually called Jack in the Pulpit, but I'm going to explain to you that maybe it should also be called Jill in the Pulpit, or maybe Jack and Jill in the Pulpit. It kind of depends a little bit. Jack in the Pulpit is the common name that usually goes by. Erythema triphyllum, this plant right here. It's very distinctive. It has the leaves that are divided into 3 leaflets, broad, sort of elliptic shaped leaflets. Here's a leaf. Here's another leaf here. So these big leaves that have 3 leaflets. And then from the location where the leaves kind of come together right down here, here's the reproductive part of the plant right here. Jack in the Pulpit is in a family called the Araceae. They produce these very unusual reproductive structures. There's a structure here called the spathe, S-P-A-T-H-E. It kind of looks like a leaf or a petal. It's this area right here. It kind of provides a cover. As you can see, it flops over and provides sort of a cover for the more important part down in here. And we'll pull the spathe apart here a little bit, and so we can see the spadix. This is the spadix, and the spadix is where the flowers are actually found. The spathe, again, is this leaf-like or petal-like structure that surrounds and kind of protects the spadix. Well, I was mentioning Jack versus Jill in the pulpit. So many plants that we've been looking at here today are plants that are, we call them perfect flowers. They have perfect flowers. The flowers have both male and female parts. There's a flower will have the pistil, which is the female part of the flower, and in that same flower will be stamens, which are the male part of the flower. But some plants, and Jack in the Pulpit here, or Jill in the Pulpit, is a good example of plants that sometimes just have one of the sexes in their flowers. And that's what's happening right here. As I look at this spadix and look at the base right here, these are just female flowers. These are pistillate or just female flowers. There are no male flowers on the spadix. So this plant right here is actually a female plant. That's why it should probably be called Jill in the pulpit. Research has been done with Jack and Jill in the pulpit here, and what we've found or learned is that the larger plants, like this one, fairly large plant, they tend to produce just female flowers on the spadix at the base, and therefore they're female plants. Younger plants, and I have found a few here today, smaller plants than this, younger plants, you do the same thing, pull the spathe apart, pull the spathe away, look at the spadix, what you would see is just male flowers. So those plants, again, are functioning just as a male plant. They just have male flowers. In some cases, you can find some plants that do have both male flowers and female flowers on the same spadix. I haven't seen any here today yet, but it can happen that you can have a plant that is still hermaphroditic, that is, it has both sexes, but the sexes will be in separate flowers. So the research has shown that the larger plants, again, tend to become female. Well, let me back up. So as a plant begins its growth and it's smaller, in its earlier stages, it will behave and function as a male plant because it produces male flowers. As that plant becomes better established over the years, develops a bigger root system, grows a little bit in size, has more vigor associated with it, then it will change sex, basically, change sex and produce female flowers, as we're seeing right here. And the idea is that a female plant, because it is the one that produces the fruits and the seeds, needs to have more energy, has to have access to more food reserves and be a stronger plant in order to be successful in producing the fruits and the seeds. So it kind of makes sense that the young plants, being not quite ready to have the ability to do that, will function as a male, produce pollen, and then as the plant gets bigger, it will again change sex to a female. Well, we haven't completely destroyed this. I'll kind of put the spathe back around there, and maybe this plant will still be able to produce some fruits. All right, that's Jill in the pulpit, as we just discovered. Another one that we can see right here is one that if you learn to identify, and it's easy to learn to identify, this tall plant right here with a cluster of white flowers at the top. Pretty distinctive leaves here. They're kind of, you might call them sort of triangular in shape, perhaps. Some of the leaves have a bit of a heart shape to them. Very conspicuous veination in them. Large teeth along the margins here. But a tall plant with small little white flowers. The flowers all have 4 petals. 4 petals is one of the trademarks of the mustard family. We have found garlic mustard, which is a non-native, somewhat invasive species in our forests here in the Midwest, and not a good species to have. I was here for a while earlier and I pulled a whole bunch of it. This is what we want to do with garlic mustard. When we see it, if we can spare the time, is to pull these plants out, because again, they're not supposed to be here. They can become very dense in their populations, and in some places they become so dense and so numerous that they do affect the native plants and kind of diminish the number of native plants and the species that we have. So this was imported into the northeastern part of the country in the late 1800s as a plant for the herb garden, because you can get a a garlic flavoring substitute from the tap roots on these, but it escaped those gardens and has moved westward, and again can be a very problematic species. It's best when it's in flower. It's a biennial, so it will live for 2 years. These are 2-year-old plants that are not going to flower, produce seed, and then die. And of course, they die. That's great, but they don't die until after they produce seed. And so, the best way to solve the garlic mustard problem essentially is don't let it produce any seed, because if you can remove it at this stage, then again it's not going to have the ability for these flowers to mature and produce seed. You're removing the seed source. These plants can only maintain their presence in an ecosystem like this by producing seed each year, year after year. So we interrupt that by pulling them out. You could even just cut the tops off, but it's actually better probably just to pull them out and actually collect them, because there is a little bit of research that shows that if you just throw them on the ground like this, the plant might be able to move energy from the leaves and other parts of the plant, and even though it's not rooted anymore, still have enough nourishment and energy reserves to possibly produce some seeds. And that's again the thing we don't want to have happen. So most people in garlic mustard removal operations, we pull them, put them in a garbage bag, and take them off site, which is what we're going to do with these. Okay, there's a couple more here I'm going to show you that are in vegetative form. They don't have any flowers on them yet. Probably the good one to look at right here is this one right here. So this one's called Enchanter's Nightshade. It looks like any typical green leaf plant, I suppose. I can't really describe too many real diagnostic features. It's got opposite leaves, kind of a broadly elliptic leaf, as you can see here, but no flowers yet. When it does have flowers, the flowers are going to be very small and not very conspicuous. But this is called Enchanter's Nightshade. It's not really in the nightshade family. That's a misnomer. It's in the evening primrose family, actually. So it's not poisonous or anything like that. It's a real common forest herb species. It grows about a foot to 2 feet tall or so, and can be real common. It gets dispersed by raccoons, deers, squirrels. As the seeds, when it forms the flowers and then forms the fruits have little mechanisms that stick to fur and get moved around by sticking to the outside of squirrels and woodchucks and deer and things like that. The other one I was going to show you that's vegetative is right here next to it, this one here. And this one is called black snake root, common black snake root. It too is a real common and can be somewhat ubiquitous species in forest environments. Both of these are going to be blooming in the summer, so they're more summer blooming species, about midsummer. You come back, you'll see the flowers, but again, both of these have flowers that are very small and not very showy. This one also, black snake root, is dispersed by it's kind of the same process I just described for Enchanter's Nightshade. We call that ectozochory. Ectozochory means, well, ecto means on the outside, zo means animal, and chory means seed. So again, the seed is contained in a fruit that has some kind of sharp or hooked little appendages, something that's going to hook into and grab onto the fur and get carried around and then drop off and get spread around in that fashion. That's one reason black snake root and Enchanter's Nightshade can be very common. And the last one we're going to look at here, another native species that you'll see in forest environments, is this one right here. Now this one's really distinctive. It's a bedstraw. And one of the helpful vegetative characteristics for the bed straw is that they have lots of leaves, anywhere from 6 to 8 leaves that all arise from the same point on the stem. The term for that is whorled, W-H-O-R-L-E-D. Anytime there's 3 or more leaves that arise from the same point on the stem, that's the term that's used for that. This one has at least 8 leaves. It has a very weak stem. You can see it's not really standing up. It kind of reclines and grows over top of the other plants. This is an annual species. It grows from seed each year. It produces, all of the bed straws produce tiny, tiny little white flowers. It's in flower. Maybe those are visible right there. Tiny little flowers. They're not more than just a couple of millimeters wide. So the flowers, again, are not conspicuous at all. Many of the bed straws, though, have this feature. This one in particular is well known for it. It's got little bristly hairs on the stem and on the foliage that allow it to stick to anything. It's the source of Velcro. It's the inspiration for Velcro. Some people call it the Velcro plant. Actually, if you look it up, it wasn't this plant that actually inspired the creator of Velcro, but a plant similar to this, at least, does the same kind of thing. So it will disperse itself by just the whole plant sticking to things that are moving around through the forest, clinging to them, and then dropping off at some point, and again dispersing the seed that way. This again is called Cleaver's bed straw. I may not have given you the common name for it. Cleaver's bed straw. Galium aparini. Right, we have 4 new species right here in front of me. We're going to take a look at each of them quickly. We'll start with this big one right here that's got, again, compound and divided leaves. Maybe you can see all this hairiness, all this pubescence, lots of fairly dense white colored hairs on the stem here. It's not in flower yet. If you look real close, we can see young flower buds right here starting to form. So it's going to be in flower in another 10 days probably or so. There's 2 species that look just like this that we have to determine which one it is. And the 2 options are either sweet cicely or anise root. They're both species in the genus Osmorrhiza. Again, pretty common plant species in our oak hickory forests. The best way to tell them apart vegetatively probably is to use your nose. Sometimes your nose works pretty well. So what I do in this one is going to take a leaf here and kind of crush it up a little bit, kind of get some of the juices kind of released there, and smell it really closely. And I note that I don't smell any kind of black licorice scent or smell at all. That means that it is sweet cicely, most likely is sweet cicely. When it's in flower, we would be able to look at the flower and use the length of the style on the pistils to help separate the 2. Sweet cicely would have styles on the pistil that are short, and the other one that looks like this, anise root, which of course when you do this and crush it up and smell it, you get a distinct smell of black licorice. That's the anise scent that you're smelling, hence the name anise root. The anise scent comes from, it was best probably detected in the roots, but I don't like to dig up the plants to crush or smell the root. You can, again, with a good handful of leaf tissue, check that out and see if you can detect that black licorice smell. Again, this one does not have that black licorice smell, so this is sweet cicely. It also goes in line with just some general things. Usually sweet cicely is the one that has much more pubescence on it, like this, whereas anise root can have some, but more often anise root does not have this pubescence on the stem. more often Anise root has glabrous stems or maybe some red streaking, but does not have this amount of hairiness that we're seeing here. And again, going back to the flowers, I mentioned if you do have the flowers and you look at the flowers real close, and the style on the pistil, which is the portion of the pistil that is kind of elongated and has a stigma at the end of it, that style on Sweet Cicely is going to be short, usually less than about 1 millimeter or so in length, and the style on Anise root, which by the name, its scientific name is Osmorrhiza longistylus, gives you the hint that that style is much longer, and it is. It's usually over 2 millimeters or so in length. But again, vegetatively and smelling it, you can be pretty reliable which of the two species you have by looking at the stem and the pubescence and then taking a smell of the leaves. All right, right next to it here is one of the many sedges that grow in forest environments. The sedges are graminoids or grass-like species. They're monocots. They have the narrow parallel veined leaves, of course, like grasses. To do sedges, you really do need to have this part that I have in my palm here, which is the flowering structures. The sedges produce a unique structure called a perigynia, which is a sac-like structure that surrounds the female flowers. The sedges have male and female flowers on the same plant, but the flowers are the sexes are in different flowers. So there's female flowers and there's male flowers. They're both found on an individual plant, but they're in separate flowers. So the female flowers have these little structures called perigynia, which I'm going to isolate right there. The male flowers are actually right here, and the female flowers are right here. And so what you need to really do sedges very well is you need to be able to look at the female flowers and this structure again called the perigynia, the sac-like structure that surrounds the female flowers. When I use my hand lens and I look at the perigynia, I see that they have a short little beak on them, and they have a lot of pubescence on them, little hairs that are on the perigynia. And that reminds me, okay, now I'm going to look at the plant itself, the leaves, the foliage, and I can even see without my hand lens, but I'll check, I can see a lot of hairs and pubescence on the leaves and the lower part of the stem here. That tells me, these two features tell me that this is Carex herdifolia, or a common name would be hairy leaf sedge. So hairy leaf sedge, pretty common species in these forest environments that we're in here today. But there are many other species of sedge. There's another one right here, right next to it, and I can't tell you for sure what that one is at all because there's no fruiting structures on this one. This one does not have any hairs on it. It's finer leaved, as you can see, kind of compared to these right here. Leaves are thinner, more slender, finer. It's a different species of sedge. There's about 120 different species of sedge in Iowa, so it's hard to say for sure which one it is until you have those flowers. Then two more. This one right here in front of me is a species that is called carrion flower or carrion plant. It's in the genus Smilex. The scientific name is Smilex acerata. So it's kind of distinctive in the long petiolate leaves. So the leaves here have long leaf stems or petioles. They come off of the stem kind of in alternate fashion, with the last ones kind of grouped or clustered together there. They have kind of roundish leaf shape here with leaf veins that, if you can see them on the bottom here, Yeah, maybe you can see these here. The leaf veins are kind of parallel just a little bit, but they kind of have this spreading arc motion to them here, or shape to them. So the carrion flower produces little flowers that, true to the name of the plant, produces a scent that attracts flies, because the scent of the flowers mimics the smell of carrion, or dead or rotting meat. So again, this is a herbaceous species, carrion flower, genus Smilex. It's a relative of greenbrier, which maybe you're familiar with. Greenbrier is a woody plant that vines and can be found in forest environments like this, that is very bristly and something you don't want to run into. All right, but this is a lot more friendly plant than what greenbrier is. And then the last one I'm going to show you here is this one right here. Now, some of these plants, it's kind of hard to point to diagnostic features. I recognize these plants a lot just on kind of what we call gestalt kind of characteristics, the same way that you might recognize, people that you know by looking at their face. You can't describe exactly what it is about their face you are seeing that tells you who they are. That's kind of the same way for me with some of these plants. This is jewelweed. It's an annual that comes up each year from seed. There are two species of jewelweed that we have in Iowa. Impatiens is the genus name. We have Impatiens pallida and Impatiens capensis. And the difference mainly is in the color of the flowers. And without the flowers, there is really no way to tell which of the two species this is. If I was doing a floristic survey, I would just have to say this is a jewelweed species at this point. I won't know until I come back later and hopefully see some flowers. But jewelweed is kind of famous. The other name for it is touch-me-not, and that comes from an aspect of the fruits that the plant forms. Plant forms the fruit from the flowers, like all flowers. The ovary portion of the flower becomes the fruit, which contains the seeds. And touch-me-nots get their name from the fruits having this kind of unique characteristic where they have an appendage that is inside the fruit, that as the fruit matures and gets ready to disperse the seeds, this appendage gets more and more tensile quality to it, and when the fruit is completely ripe, then if just a little bit of motion or just something that touches the fruit, something that disturbs it a little bit, will cause that fruit to explode. That's called, the term for that is seed dispersal by ballistic force, essentially explosive force. The seed is inside the fruit, and the fruit kind of explodes, basically again with this mechanism of this cartilaginous kind of structure inside of it. And that helps to spread the seed then, because the explosive force will throw the seed out away from the plant, maybe upwards of half a meter or so. So it's called touch-me-not because the idea is that you shouldn't touch the flower too soon. But I've always told people maybe it should be renamed touch-me-do, because it wants to be touched, essentially, because that's what's going to help it to have those fruits explode and disperse the seed. Look what we found here, a nice little population of May-apples. May-apples are these large, very conspicuous plants here. We look at them close here, we see that a May-apple has a stem that arises from an underground rhizome, which is a horizontal stem, has a shoot that comes up, and some plants will have then two leaves that branch at a common point right here. At this common point where they branch, that's the point where here we have a flower bud. A flower will form. Other plants that are younger, such as this one back here, just have a single leaf. This is again a leaf that's coming from an underground stem. This one will not produce any flowers. So May-apples produce large white flowers. A single large white flower here. They'll kind of droop downwards, It'll be over an inch wide at least, pretty conspicuous. All parts of the mayapple plant, the root stock below, the rhizomes, the below ground, the shoot system here, and the fruits that form from the flowers have at least some mild toxicity associated with them. So they're not anything you should obviously try to eat. The fruit does become edible after it ripens. That is indicated as the fruit turns from a green to more of a yellow color. So it is possible to utilize the fruit as a food source, maybe for making a jam or something like that after it ripens, but not before. Some people have reported getting some dermatitis type reactions just by touching the leaves again, because again, all parts of the plant do have at least some mild toxicity associated with them. This is a good plant to talk about. Again, the importance of plants and the fact that really one way of thinking about a plant from a physiological point of view is that plants are like biochemical factories. They make lots of different compounds. They have lots of different biochemical pathways going on. They produce lots of different kinds of chemistry. And mayapples produce a chemical called podophyllin. Podophyllin has been researched scientifically and found to be effective as a treatment against, to help reduce and remove warts. And there's even been some research that's gone a little bit further with that and found that podophyllin has apparently some anti-tumor activity, and there's some indication that perhaps it would have some benefit in the treatment of cancer. So again, that's one reason we need to help protect our plants. They are making all kinds of different chemicals. Of course, the plants use the chemicals for their own purposes, but in some cases, again, we can see opportunities for the plants as having some medicinal value for us. All right, and another plant nearby right here, just over here by this log, is another plant that we see blooming in the spring. So the mayapple is more of a summer bloomer. It's just starting to gain flower. This one right here, called bloodroots, is another example of a spring bloomer. It's done blooming. It's one of the early ones, again in the spring. But again, it's a spring bloomer, but it's not a spring ephemeral. This plant will persist and have these leaves present during the rest of the summer, photosynthesizing. So again, it makes use of the early spring light availability to flower, and then it's able to tolerate the shade that develops as the leaves come out on the trees. It's able to continue to grow and again produce food and store food in the root system during the summer. We don't have any flowers here again. We don't even have any fruits, I don't think, but it produces white flowers with several petals, large white flowers over an inch across with lots of petals. The leaves, as you can kind of see here, are pretty distinctive. These large, basically circular shaped leaf with lots of lobing cut down into them. You got these big lobes, and then the lobes even have lobes cut into them as well. Some of these lobes here have smaller lobes cut into them at the end. So it's a pretty distinctive leaf, easy to recognize when it first comes up in the spring.